You've tuned in to Powerhouse on Purpose podcast, your go-to space for inspiration, empowerment, and practical strategies to unlock your potential and step boldly into your purpose.
Hi everyone, my name is Crestani and I'm from my little business called Willow Healing. It's little at the moment, but I'm hoping to go worldwide, which would be amazing. And I'm a spiritual epigeneticist. So what that means is I actually work with God and with people to tap into their true soul essence and to have a look what's blocking them from being able to heal, to move forward in their life, to things happen such as traumas, or we get beliefs put on us from society or things that are happening around us. And that can actually stop us from entering into a place where our body and our mind and our soul can actually make its purest connection with God and angels and that sort of thing. So I work with my clients to unpack that and coach them on their journey. So essentially, I'm a coach who does magic with energy by connecting into God and pulling their DNA up. It's really magical. That's the only way I can describe it, and miracles happen too, which is really, really cool.
Well, welcome, Catherine, to the Powerhouse on Purpose podcast. We are very happy to have you. We have not had a spiritual epigeneticist, right? And so I'm very interested in what you do. I do, of course, believe in God. I love just the process of getting to know who God is and how he designed us and how divinely strategic God is. So I don't believe that we are not here for a reason. I do believe that we need to have those connections to him and to have connections within ourselves, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like with the soul, with the body, with the mind. And so we are very glad to have you. How did you come into this line of work? Like, what brought you to this space where you learned that this is something that you can do for people?
Well, it's been a journey. I think we've all been through a journey. And it started I had a friend say to me, because I was married before and in a relationship where I kind of just let myself die, and that there was just a shell of me. There was nothing left of me. And I just kept wanting him to be happy and not realizing how unhappy I was. And it was like a friend turned to me in this moment, and this is my divine intervention turning point. And all he said to me was, we were listening to music and I had no idea what it was. And I used to love music. I used to make people mixtapes if anyone was like around back then, or, put music onto a disc and give it to my friends and be like, hey, I got this off Napster, if anyone knows about Napster. But, and he turned to me and he just said, I don't know who you are anymore. And that is kind of what triggered, just that one sentence triggered this catalyst of going in within and going, oh my goodness, I don't even know who I am anymore. And from there, this journey just evolved where, I started to reclaim myself and started to feel there was something more for me. There was a bigger purpose. So my background with work is I was a speech language, or still am in some days, a speech language pathologist working with kids. And people kept saying to me, your job must be really fulfilling. It must be so beautiful. I'm like, it is beautiful working with children, and it is beautiful helping them able to communicate. But it's not nourishing me. There's something missing. And then my naturopath who I was seeing, his partner started doing this offering. And I said, hey, I saw, Carly's doing this work. And he goes, yeah, you should really do it. And I was like, okay. And so I jumped in. And I started unpacking this connection with God and with angels and just really tapping into myself and my intuition. And then I started getting these hits, I could talk to spirits who had passed, to help people get messages. I could all of a sudden feel other people's pain, which was a big thing for me because it turned out I've been doing that my whole life and I didn't even know that that's what was happening. Like, I go to a party and end up really sick and thought it was just something I ate or drank, where it was actually I was feeling other people's pain in that setting, and it was quite overwhelming for my body. So then I learned and followed that breadcrumb and was like, I need to learn how to protect myself from this, because I don't want to have to go, you go to the shops and then be crippled in pain, because that's not, how you want to live life. And then so then I just kept unpacking, and just the more I tapped into myself, the more these things happened. And then this beautiful knowledge was given to me with how to work with the DNA and work with souls so that I can unpack all these things. And it's just it's so quick. It's just when I connect a lot with God to do healing, and when I'm up there, it's just this bliss and this peace and just this really divine, beautiful connection. Sometimes it's really hard to put into words as well. And sometimes, especially when angels are talking to me, to help with the healing. It's so quick. And I'm like, whoa, 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 hang on, hang on. I've got to put this in words. I've got to translate this to so we can actually understand it. And they're really strict too. Like if I don't get the wording right, they're like, nope, say this instead, say this instead. So it's there's a lot of ethics involved too, which keeps you accountable, which I really like and respect, because otherwise, what stops someone walking around just tapping into everybody's, kind of, oh, that person needs this, that person needs this. So there's a lot of respect that comes from having this access and this gift as well, which I'm really grateful for.
I hear you said God, angels, but you also said talking to spirits that have passed on, right?
Yeah.
So, do you ever encounter like any pushback? Like, do people ever feel some type of way of like hearing that you talk to spirits who have passed on, or is there some type of friction when there's God and spirituality versus, being able to talk to essentially the dead, so to speak?
Don't choose to do it. So I found that the messages that come through, the person really needs to come through. So I don't go out of my way, even when I'm working with somebody. It might be a loved one that's passed that has come through. But again, it's all through God, right? So, I like to believe that if we have the right energy in our life and choose the right path and always choose to be a better person, to always choose to, find the goodness and the kindness in our hearts and work from a place of love, then we will get to that point where, we can connect back to God. So when they come through, it's often with a really important message that the person needs to know. So the very first message there was the second. The biggest message I got, which was kind of like almost like a test for me, was actually for my dad. And it was from my grandmother that had passed. And I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want it. I was like really freaked out about it. And I actually lost the hearing in my ear until I chose to listen to it. And so then I just learned to trust what was coming through. And that message was really powerful for my dad at that time. And he really needed to hear that. And he was actually really accepting for it. And he is the biggest cynic when it comes to things like this. And now if I call him and ask how someone is, he goes, what do you know? So we had this beautiful shift. So some of the other message I've had through, and it's normally grandmothers. Weirdly, now I think about it, one of my really good friends, her husband passed. So that was really nice to be able to get a message for her because he wasn't able to communicate that before he passed. But I don't go looking for it. And sometimes I'll have spirits show up or souls show up and they just need help kind of connecting in to help them kind of keep going through and keep them going through that process of passing and their soul moving on and reconnecting back to God. So I didn't go looking for it. And I don't often tell people, obviously it came up for a reason today, I don't often tell people I do it. I don't say, hey, come to me, you can talk to a loved one that's passed. But it often comes through if someone very significant in that person's life has passed, they'll often come through with messages, especially when we're working with unpacking why they need to be healing or what's stopping them from being exactly who they want to be in this world.
That's good. I have an unpopular opinion, I believe. We often sometimes assign certain things to, demons or even witchcraft sometimes are some of the connotations that's given to certain things. But for me, I've always had this thought that I just feel like we turn so much over, but also we'll say that God created everything, right? So he's the creator of all things. And then we'll say things like, that's demonic. And so this thing that God has allowed is turned over and given refuge with whatever negative connotation. And so you're actually probably along the lines of that staple desire that I have, that we will see the world in an expanded way to where we really allow God to be limitless. And so I've been told First of all, I'm in Alabama. I'm in the Bible Belt of the U.S., right? And so there's a lot of conservation here. There's very conservative beliefs here. And don't get me wrong, I'm a very big believer in God. I do believe in Jesus Christ. I love the Word of God, but I don't put limits on who God is or what He's created. I have been surrounded by lots of people who don't believe you can talk to spirits. You can't talk to people who have passed on. And I just don't know if that's true, because I'm like, but God can do anything. And two
Mm-hmm.
things can be true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if I've ever experienced it myself. I will say that. But I definitely don't say that it's not possible. And so tell me a little bit more about your coaching, your style of how you sort of walk people through the process.
Yeah, so I I'm all about empowerment. So I want people and I want to teach the souls that I work with how to empower themselves to move through their own journey. So I'm here holding space, but I'm not going to do all the work for the person, because that's not helping you to empower yourself to keep going on your journey. That is just, here, I'll pull out my hand and pull you along. And that is not, for me, that doesn't resonate with allowing you to become exactly who you want to be. So often when I work with my clients, some will come in with specific things that they want to achieve, but some will actually be, I don't know. I don't know what I need. I just know I need something and I don't know what it is. We have a group program that we're starting a new cohort. And so twice a week we meet. And the first one we tap into, as I talked about in my introduction, I tap into the DNA of everyone and I pull up common things, like common themes. And often it's funny, like if you go to a group event, often people will speak, right? And there will always be something that you can take from that person and what they're sharing, because you all collectively end up in a room for a reason. And I believe often it's God's magic working, right? Like, hey, everyone, come together. These people really need to be together and hear these messages. And it's the same idea of, a person might be talking and you kind of, tuned out, and then they'll say something specific and you're like, oh, that's me. And it pulls you back in because your system is like, oh, I actually need to find that. So yeah, so that's our first kind of session. And then the second session is where we actually dive into those coaching and pull apart, hey, what's blocking you in your life and how can we reframe that? How can we, see what's happening? And I am a true believer that God leaves us little breadcrumbs, signs and symbols to find the right people we need in our life, right? So for example, um, my car, somehow I drove my car into a gutter. And this is just 2 days ago. And I popped the tire, but I kept feeling and getting this message, which I call my intuition, but I say it's my God message, that I had to change my tires. And I kept putting it off. So somehow I drive into this gutter, not even knowing how. I feel there was an extra pull in there. And even my husband's looking at me going, how did you drive into that gutter? And I'm like, I still don't know. And I popped this tire spectacularly. So then I had to change the tires. And then I'm like, oh my goodness. And then when the tires were getting changed yesterday, they went to restart my car to move it. And the battery was flat. And I was like, really? So, and then I sat down and I realized, even through, because I had coaching myself and I was sharing this story, and they're like, the car is reflecting you. You need to take some time to come back to you and look after yourself and put some maintenance and nourishment into yourself. And I was like, it's so true. And I often, when I'm working with clients too, when they come in with physical things happening, we unpack what's going on underneath, and 99% of the time there's actually an underlying emotional cause which is highlighted through the body. So for example, if you lose your voice, or your voice becomes very croaky and you can't get it to come back, it's because you're not saying something, you're not speaking your truth, and getting that out, and no matter what way. And that's life. Sometimes we can't say to people, hey, I really am offended with how you're treating me, especially if it's someone, of authority. It might be a boss, or it might be, sometimes it's even our family. It can be really confrontational to say to them, hey, that was not okay that you did that. So
Right.
if that's something, Yeah. And if somebody's really struggling with that, that's where, you could write a letter, or you need to find a way to get it out. And I was working with this girl, and she was really beautiful, and she lost her voice. And I just said to her, "What aren't you saying?" And she's like, "Huh." And then a week later, she still didn't have her voice. And I was like, "Okay, well, you still need to tap in and see what you're saying. And, there's something you're not saying." She goes, "Oh, I don't know what it is." And then the next week, she still had no voice. This is like 3 weeks. And she had apparently hadn't had her voice for weeks. And I said, "Oh, do you want me to check in for you?" Because I always ask permission. Do you want me to see what's happening with you? And then straight away, I was like, okay, there's something happening with a male in your life, and it's something to do with your family. And then she runs over to the little office we're in. She shuts the door and she goes, "How did you know that?" And I said, "Well, you asked me to check in for you." She goes, "I can't say something to my sister's boyfriend." She goes, "I really don't like him and he's really offensive. And I really want to tell him what I'm thinking and I can't." I was like, "All right, let's write it down." I said, "And then you can burn it if you like, and, send it back to God and with love." And then as soon as she did that, her voice was back straight away. And it's such a
Wow.
little exercise, and it's so powerful. And that's what I hope to instill with anybody that I work with, is this little tools and little things to guide them along so that they can empower themselves, tap back within. And then often we unpack these magical gifts that God has given us. We all have gifts that God's given us to make the world a better place, to help shift the world so it's coming more into God's light, and so once you start to unpack all the things like self-doubt and all these beliefs that we've been put on, like we're not good enough or we can't do that, once you start to unpack all that, then this magic happens and you don't even recognize yourself. I'm a different person like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, because you keep choosing to work on yourself and keep empowering yourself. And we always keep learning. I don't think, and, we all strive to be, I feel my role model is to be, I think, that bumper sticker, what would Jesus do? I often think that in situations where I just want to get angry and want to get frustrated, and those emotions aren't bad. But at the same time, you can take a step back and think, all right, how can I bring love into this situation? And how can I bring light and wisdom rather than just reacting to the words that are coming at me or reacting to the situation that's happening? And it's not about pushing those emotions aside. It's about, oh yeah, I am angry about that. Why am I angry about that? And then pulling that back and then bringing a different angle to it.
That's very, very insightful. I like it. You were talking about your car incident. Speaking of car incidents, I actually
Oh yeah.
hydroplaned. Yeah, I
Okay.
hydroplaned and we ended up, it's funny you talk about tires. And so we're traveling down a two lane and we're on the inside lane and I hit a patch of water, but it's so dark outside because it's really early and it gets dark early. I mean, it stays dark earlier here right now. And so
Yep.
I'm taking my son to school to the bus stop, but I hit this patch of water and we spin out. And so we spin to the left. So now I'm facing the traffic that I was in. We slid across the median. And so all that grass, we slid all through that. But where the pavement starts again on the opposite side of the median, that back passenger tire smacked it so hard the airbags came out. But it also smacked it so hard that it spent us back the other way. And so when we landed, we were in the median, my car on the outside. The body of my car looks fine. It looks impeccable. You would have never known anything happened. The inside, the dashboard has like those lines in it, like when your TV's getting ready to go out. So my my screen
Yep.
had those lines in it, like I said, airbags deployed. And so when I called my husband, neither me or my son had gotten out. Shaken up, of course. Grateful that we didn't hit anybody else. But being able to see the headlights of oncoming traffic as we were spinning was that was tough. And so
Yeah.
my husband came and we watched him pass us. I'm looking out the windshield and he passes. I'm like, where is he going? He didn't know it was us because when I told him how bad the inside looked, he's like, was that y'all? He called me. He's like, did I just pass you? I'm like, yes, where are you going? So when I got out and looked at the vehicle, I could not believe that it was fully intact. Nothing wrong. The tire hadn't gone flat. We ended up having to wait for the tow truck for 3 hours. The tire went flat once he was pulling it on the tow truck. But it's been in my spirit so much about how the inside looked so bad, but to get out and everything looked fine. I really have likened it sort of to my life when I was working in corporate America, and just really on the outside, everything looks great. You have the salary, you just bought a new house, you're respected in your field, you're accomplished in your field, you're successful by all other notions, but inside, I have blown my airbags. My airbags have deployed. I'm not in good shape and I'm in need of repair. That's what it really reminded me of. So as you likened what's happening with the vehicle was sort of indicative of what's happening with you, it kind of puts a different perspective on us hydroplaning and spinning out, because I truly felt like that was my life. When I look at that car, I'm like, that was me. I looked great. I mean, I would be cute. I dress nice. My hair would be done. But on the inside, there was no passion. There was no desire to go to this job every day. And so it just makes you really look at life a little differently when you know that that energy is all connected. And lately I've had this pain in my back. I don't know what it is. Of course, people are like, go see a chiropractor. And this was prior to the incident, so it's not accident related. But it's just this one pain in this one little spot in my back. And I'm always like, what is that? It's not something I've ever encountered before, but it's been probably over the last month or so. And everybody's like, go to
Is
the doctor
it
and get looked at. I'm like, nope.
is it in the middle of your back?
Yeah. Yeah, like
Yeah.
upper mid. Yeah.
In the middle of our back, it's the back of our heart space, right? So when we're filtering a lot of emotions, they come through the back around, especially in women, if you think about that bra strap area. And when there's a clog of those
Yeah.
emotions, that's where it gets backed up. And it can often be either we're not emotionally supporting ourselves, or we feel like we're not supported emotionally in our life. So when there's a block in that middle area, that is often the emotions starting to push through, saying, hey, you need to sit with those or feel those. And anything almost to do with your back is feeling not supported. The higher up you go, it's kind of like you're being pushed down. I have an issue with my neck that I've been working on shifting, because I used to hide. I used to dim my light and hide and would put my head down. So then my neck's like, oh no, we want to go up. But we're used to being like this. So we want to go up again. But it's like adjusting to this new way of being. And when you have a big shift in your life, especially having been in the corporate world for so long, and I can resonate fully with this because I used to own a company that owned my life 24/7, And, when we're in that state for so long and we feel that pressure on there, we have to suppress our emotions, especially when we're in those situations. And if you're in a very patriarchal, dominated situation, or any woman who owns a company that's very much, that's what I struggled with. I couldn't be this loving person I wanted to be. I had to be this really hard person to keep the company going, to keep it growing, to keep on the emails, to keep on the staff. And all I really wanted to do was sit down and have a conversation and really learn who that person was. And I would do that, but then they would go do something that didn't align, or, it's just really tricky. And when we were saying, on the outside, like you were saying, exactly like with the car, everything looks bright and shiny, and everyone's like, you've got the house and the 2 cars, and you've got, we have these boxes that society puts us in, or that we put ourselves in, that we think we have to be.
Right.
But we don't fit in boxes. Yes, you could be a mum. Yes, you can be a daughter. Yes, you can have a parent, have some pets. Yes, you can be a homeowner. Yes, you can be all these things. Yes, you can be a corporate world person. But in the end, it's all those things that make who you are. So we need to stop putting ourselves in boxes. And what God kind of showed me was we need to bash those boxes down and imagine more of us in a bubble. And what we want to be, we can float and kind of just be, who we want to be, rather than keep putting ourselves in these individual categories. How many times do you introduce yourself to someone and they go, oh, what do you do? And I say to them, it depends what day of the week it is. It depends what you want me to be. What do you want me to be for you? I prefer the questions like, what's your dream and what's your vision? Because that is going to tap more into a person's passion and why they get up in the morning. I used to struggle getting up in the
Yeah.
morning. Now I get up at 5 a.m. Well, earlier this morning I got up earlier so I could talk to you, and it's really powerful to have something bigger to get up for in the morning and know that that's your passion. You're going to go serve the world and serve the world in a way that's going to honor God. Bring love and bring joy. And, I love laughter because, I find if I can get someone to laugh, someone's mood will shift, especially,
Yeah.
you got to see the funny side in life because there's a lot that happens that's so serious. But if we don't have that, then we don't get the contrast either.
I agree. I think a lot of my decision to leave my corporate position and really just come home essentially, which for some that's failure, for some that's unheard of, for some that's absolute success suicide, so to speak. Shortly after I actually left, I went to a class where it was for entrepreneurs. And one of the first things one of the guys that was talking about finance said, he said, do not go and quit your job. You need to keep that job so that income can go into your business. He said something along the lines of, when you come to us and ask for a business loan, we're going to ask you what kind of income you have to see if you can pay it back. And I'm thinking to myself, with no income, with no experience, with nothing else going on in life, I could go to Fannie Mae or whatever educational institution and ask for $100,000 loan to get an education. And they will let me sign my name on the dotted line. I could be 19 years old. But if I come to you and ask you for 10 grand for a business loan, you'll say no. At 38, well established, well experienced, good credit. And you'll still say no because I have no income. It's crazy to know that truth and then want to abide by the rest of America's or even the world's dynamic of what a successful person is. And I just can't do it. I'm sitting here thinking about the way I don't feel supported. And there's probably several ways right now. I published my first book. I'm doing this podcast. But essentially, my decision to leave corporate America and just really dive into what I really feel passionate about, and even just taking time to do 6 or 7 different things to see if something actually makes me feel passionate, is unheard of in my family dynamic. It's unheard of in my environment. It's unheard of in my community. So many people, especially, and I hate to say this because I am so for women, especially black women, of course, being that I am a black woman. I want to support us more than anybody else on the planet, but they are the first to tell me not to do what I'm doing. It's career
Yeah.
suicide. What are you thinking? What are you going to do? How are you going to pay bills? Like all those questions, I understand why they're asking them. I understand why they want to know. I even understand people are like, so what's your plan? And my plan wasn't written out intentionally because that's what's wrong with the dynamic that I've been living all this time. I'm always planned. Always strategic. I always want to tackle it this way. But at the end of the day, it's not who I am. I have no passion to do that. I have no passion to get the college degree. I have no passion to work the job and, build retirement. I don't want to do any of that.
Yeah.
I don't. I
And
want to be impactful in
agree.
in the way that God designed. That's really what I want to do.
Yeah. And honoring that and the fact that you were able to walk away and see that in yourself. Imagine now if you were still in that position and that would be eating away inside you. And then that's when we start to get more dis-ease in our body, starts to come through. And I know I had chronic stress. I was popping these like little natural, they had like passion flower and all these really natural herbs in it. And I was popping them like candy because that was the only way I could still function. And I wasn't even sleeping. Like I would wake up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. I laughed because I had this journal I bought called a 3 a.m. journal. That's actually what it said on the front. And I would fill it with all the things from work. And that was the only way I could go back to sleep. Or I would actually get up in the middle of the night and send emails to people, replying still back to emails because my to-do list just never ended. And it was when I stepped back and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And my husband kept saying, sell the business, sell the business. He goes, you're not happy. This is the contrast from my last relationship, right? Where I have someone who actually genuinely wants me to be happy and be thriving. And, I'm really grateful that I found him. And I believe God put him in my path because we were both in states where we were ready to accept the love that we deserve, but actually loving ourselves first to do that. And that's the magic of that too. But, when you're constantly in these, and when I stopped, my body, like when I sold the business, I always joke with my boss because I still work for him that I said, "You bought my stress." I said, "Thanks for that." Thanks for buying my stress. But I wasn't ready for the abundance with that either. And all this, extra money that we'd had all of a sudden disappeared. And it wasn't we were living frugally or anything like that. Just things happened, and all of a sudden we're back to living from week to week. And I went, why? Instead of being angry about it, I went on a quest to search to find out why. Much like you're on this quest to search for what's your passion. Like, I'm going to look at this and look at this and look at this. But I never went to find that through chasing degrees. And that's another box we do in societies, right? Oh, what are your qualifications? I mean, how do I explain to people God gave me these gifts? They're my qualifications. Like how do I? How
That's
do you?
very hard to explain because we've put a process, a rubric around everything. And I always think about it. So, doctors, how did doctors become doctors before there were institutions? Your great grandfather was a doctor. So your granddad became a doctor. So your dad became a doctor. And so you as a child would go to work with your dad, you watch what he do, and you became a doctor. It was family legacy back then. And so I was
Yeah.
just thinking about at what point did we allow the powers that be to tell us that we're only qualified for a thing if they have decided to put us through or allow us, even now that you have to be accepted into institutions of this educational institutions,
Yep.
have allowed you in and allowed you to go into debt to get a piece of paper that says you're qualified. Nothing against anyone who has a degree. I actually have an associate's degree and have been pursuing my finance degree on and off, my bachelor's, but it's hard to do. It's hard to stick with it for me because I see the underlying issue of it. I'm great at it. And unfortunately, I've achieved a very dynamic position in corporate America without it. It's going to be very hard to feel like I have to have it. And that's the thing. It's like I know it's not true. And so what would you say to someone that's like that has a very what some would call ethereal approach to living this life? Like what you do, the type of coaching you do isn't necessarily considered normal or even acceptable sometimes, right? But so what do you tell people who are in this dynamic? Because I feel like I am a fish out of water. But then I'm like, oh, I'm not a fish. I'm a tiger. It's and so oh, y'all were fish. And now I get
I
it.
Yeah, I believe we attract the people that we're meant to in our lives. So, the people that have come, they don't sit there and they question this because often we get to a point too where we've tried everything else and it doesn't work or it's not resonating or, sometimes the biggest thing we can do is, you know, someone says something to us, hey, you should go get this treatment or you should take this medication or, for me, I know that was my turning point because I kept having, I think I was about 20 or in my early 20s and my foot kept cramping and spasming like this. And I went to the doctor because that's what we're taught to do. And I'm not disregarding the medical profession, but I went to the doctor and he said to me, I'm going to send you for an x-ray. And I'm like, but my foot is spasmed. Shouldn't you be sending me for an ultrasound? Because I have an applied science background. So I did biochemistry and all these things like that and biology and I'm like, this isn't sitting with me, but I'm going to go along and do the process. And then he goes, oh, and then by the way, I think you should take this anti-arthritis medication. I'm like, I'm in my 20s. I don't have arthritis. I know it's not arthritis. And then I had an appointment with my acupuncturist a few days later because he'd been helping. I have like a birth trauma. He was helping unpack scar tissue and things from that. And he goes, "Why didn't you call me?" And he puts one needle in and my whole foot releases. And I was like, "Oh my goodness, thank you." And then a few weeks later, again, this is, like God putting you in the right place at the right time. I was at this conference and it was these biomedical pediatricians. So biomedical pediatricians take into account the herbal holistic side of things and actually mesh it with modern medicine. And I have a lot of respect for what they do. It's really cool how they're trying to bring both sides together. So the non-traditional and the traditional. Anyway, and this speaker got up and he was going through how different deficiencies can present in children or in adults. And he got to a magnesium deficiency and I went, that is me. That is me to a T, like having spasms and cramps and I had every symptom. And then I went on a quest to find a naturopath, right? And then I found my naturopath and then he helped me like with my healing and my health. But I didn't go that traditional route, but I had to go through those different processes and explain, like do what society told me and then follow my little breadcrumbs that the universe gave me to get to that point. So, when people come for me for coaching, I say, what do you want? If you could have anything in the world, what would it be? And I don't care if it's like you want $1 million. Why do you want $1 million and what would you do with it? Oh, I want to have, a beautiful relationship. All right. Well, we need to work on you first before we can have that beautiful relationship because like attracts like, right? If you're going to focus on all the things that you don't love about yourself, then you're going to attract somebody that doesn't love things about themselves, and then that's going to be a bit of a catapult as well. So I don't tell people to change anything. It's always a choice. So, we can be problem aware, but it's only when we're looking for a solution and we want to create a change and we want to be the change in the world, then that's where I'm here to hold space for you. I'm not going to be here saying, oh, you should do this, this, and this. That might come through as like, hey, God recommends that you could do this and then this might happen, or these are kind of things that will help your health, but consult with whoever's in your life as well, because it's a team. You need a team of support. You need a team of people around you to support you. And this is like the long answer to your question, but so when people come to me, it's not conventional what I do, but they also know it's not conventional what I do. So it's like, they're like, okay, I'm ready. I know my soul wants something more and I'm not getting it because I've already explored these avenues. It's like, what's next for me? And sometimes people come and we'll have a few sessions and then they'll go again. And then they might come back again and then we'll have a few sessions. Whereas that's why I've created this like program now, which is I'm going to go across, it's a 3-month commitment and twice a week, which I don't feel so horrible. But at the same time, then we can create community with each other and be surrounded by people going through similar things to support each other. Because if we don't have that support and community, it's really hard. Like you said, you've made all these changes and your family doesn't understand because it can often trigger things in them going, yeah, but I did that. And hang on, maybe it's not right. And I know this is being reflected in my family. So, when I decided to leave my first husband, my family didn't know what to do with it because it was very reflective and triggering for them to look at their own relationship. And I had a lot of friends fall away. I always joked that they were afraid of catching divorce, and I had, all these friends kind of fall away. And I just went, okay. And it wasn't that I thought they weren't being good friends. It's just I understood that was mirroring to them things that they maybe didn't want to look at in their own lives. And that's okay too. And then when I decided to sell my company, I had both schools, like you were saying. Some were like, wow, that's amazing that you're choosing yourself. And then I had some that were like, oh, why would you do that? Like everyone wants to own their own business. And I'm like, yes, I do want to own my own business, but this time I'm doing it my way and I'm doing with what resonates with me rather than becoming a slave to a system that I created based on what I thought society wanted to see. Yeah.
Yeah. That's dope. I love it. I think we're sometimes restricted by society and we don't know the limitless possibilities of who we can be without that. I do not blame anyone who decides to do that process. Like you said, it's a system and there are different ways to get to an end goal. I just think When some take the path less traveled by, people on the usual way are just looking over like, where are you going? But where are you going to end up? And I just think we have different ways to get there. And so I commend you for finding purpose, for finding passion, for being unapologetic about pursuing what you feel God has called you to do. And so
Yeah.
kudos to you. And I'm on my way. I don't know how this is going to look. I do know that I'm gifted prophetically and I often have visions and dreams. And as a child, I would always often make sure I didn't tell people because I used to be like, they're going to say I'm a psycho. And yeah, I'm not saying anything. And so there are very many instances in my life where I'm like, God is so real. He saved me. He has kept me from so many instances. I've wrecked a car before and didn't feel anything. You would have thought I was floating on air. I almost was, unfortunately, date raped, but I do believe God stepped into that situation as well. And so it's just, I'm just astounded at some of the people who won't accept that this can be done differently. So I
Yeah, and
commend
even
you on coming on the podcast and sharing.
oh, I was going to say cars keep coming up today. I was driving home on a freeway and with my son in the back, and I got this flash, like this prophetic vision straight away that if I stayed in the lane I was at, the car in front of me was going to brake really hard and we would hit the car and spin off and essentially die, hit a tree and die. So I quickly changed lanes. And within that, and I actually screamed, and my son's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "We have to change lanes." And I changed lanes, and then sure enough, that's exactly what happened. That car hit their brakes really hard for no reason. And then I was like, "Thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God." And those moments, how else do you explain them other than God's wisdom and magic and, being truly present and wanting you to be there? You've still got work to do. That's how I looked at it. I've still got work to do. And it wasn't my time. It wasn't my son's time. We are still here to be working. And I was just incredibly grateful in that moment. And then I even had a client a couple months later, and she was driving and somehow a car hit her, set her into a spin, and she was going to hit this wall. And she's like, "God, I'm not ready to die. Please come and save me." And she said she felt this hands on the back of her car pull the car and turn it in such a way that when it hit, it didn't impact the median strip. And no one could explain, none of the emergency workers that came could explain how that could have happened. They said, you should be dead, and they're like, for all, and she's like, thank you, thank you, thank you, so there's miracles every day. We just need to choose to look at them, and we need to choose
Absolutely.
to find them. And if for people that are listening to this podcast, and I love that you are letting people have these experience and learning. It's the same reason why I started a podcast, right? You just want to get information out into the world, you know. But if you're struggling to find the beauty that God made, go look in nature. Just look at the intricacies in a flower, or if a bug lands on your hand, butterflies, you see the beautiful pattern in their wings, or, you see this little tiny spider create this beautiful big web, with silk that comes out of their backside, for goodness. Like, if you're struggling, just go take a moment and sit and look at what God created for us to live in and the energy and the magic behind that.
That's beautiful. It's such a blessing to me because even in that moment, I'm sharing something I typically don't talk about. I still don't think I've told my family, my mom, or, those closest to me, how well I've been able to see over the years, how I've seen things and understood things that they will probably never necessarily, I don't know if they won't ever believe me, but I do think they'll question, like, what? And so, just to talk about or even show when you started your story, one of those instances I was talking about, I was actually in college. I was riding down the highway going to see a friend, and something that I now would say was my intuition and, God's grace said, get out of the middle lane. I was in the center lane and I moved to the left. And as soon as I moved, it was raining, and this car came flying down. It was a red convertible. She had blonde hair. I'll never forget it. And I look, and her car, as she's driving, spent like this, and she ran. She smacked into the back of the car that was in front of me before I got out of the lane. And I mean, it was so quick. I had just moved. And so those are those moments where I'm like, God is real. And He has a plan and He has a purpose. And so That's why even though Christian based, even though I have my beliefs, I just do not subscribe to saying that God is one thing or that he is one way. I believe that he will do what he has to make sure he covers all of his children. And so it doesn't have to look like what it's been for me, for him to be able to speak to you or to anyone else. And so I'm just grateful that I had this opportunity. You are in Australia, correct?
Yes, I am. I sure am.
It may not be likely that I'd meet Catherine anywhere else in the world. And so that's why I decided to open up the podcast to this type of season. I wanted to make sure I touched on topics and talk to people who I may not get to encounter, but I also asked God to tell me who those people should be and to send them my way. I put it out, on Threads, and I was like, God, the people that should be a part of this season, a part of this podcast, a part of this purpose, let them see this, let them comment, and let them have a desire. And so I'm grateful that you have come on the podcast, that you have shared your perspective. It has been a great conversation.
Beautiful. So my piece of advice for people is to trust yourself and ignore everything around you and come back to your heart, come back to within. Like Jesus says, the kingdom is within. You need to come back within yourself, and that will help you find where you need to be in this life, and trust it. The more you trust it, the more divine and magic things that happen in your life, and God will know that you're listening and will keep giving you more things to follow. I'm Catherine, and I'm a powerhouse.
Thanks for watching. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to receive future notifications and to stay plugged in to the Powerhouse.